Welcome, everyone, to episode 23 of the MMA Freakcast. I'm Edson Valenzuela.
And I'm Matthew Salzer.
This is the first week of, the end of the first week, the beginning of the second week of June.
Yes.
2016.
Yep.
This last Saturday, we saw UFC 199 happen.
Yep. And we'll just, we'll go straight into...
You want to go right into that?
Yeah, we'll go into the results.
Main event?
Yep.
Crazy main event.
Yep. Luke Rockhold defending his title against Michael Bisping. Bisping pulled what could, without a doubt, be considered an upset.
A big upset, especially after sort of being shoehorned into the card after Chris Weidman suffered an unfortunate setback upon which it was an injury during training.
Yeah, it was an injury during training. It was a herniation. So
Bisping was able to step in on relative short notice, made the best of his opportunity, and knocked out Rockhold in the first round.
Yep.
Tell us about what you saw that day.
Okay, well, so they were, so Rockhold looked very, lackadaisical. He looked loose, and then later on he admitted that he was basically underestimating Michael Bisping. Though I would like to say I think he was still winning the round before that, before that left happened. But yeah, he wasn't really taking Michael Bisping seriously, and then Bisping clocked him with a left to the chin, and that rocked Rockhold.
Yeah.
And a few more punches, he's down on the floor, and I'd like to say it was John McCarthy stopped the fight. Maybe it was her. Yeah, it was John McCarthy. And John McCarthy's stopping the fight.
Yeah, I saw it. He cold cocked him twice with a left. He was able to get up after the initial knockdown, but was still visibly dazed. Got caught again with a left that sort of also pushed him down while also sort of tagging him. It sort of pushed him down against the cage. Once he was up against the cage, he was relatively defenseless, and caught a couple more punches to the face. Probably enough damage to stop the fight at that point. He didn't quite go limp yet, though it looked like he was fast on his way. And Bisping able to pull off a victory late in his UFC career after many years of being sort of the gatekeeper for middleweight division.
Finally rose to the top.
Really never really flirting even with contention.
There were times when he actually, to be fair, he actually fought a few number one contenders matches, but he was never able to actually win. He lost to Dan Henderson in that highlight reel knockout. He lost to
Rashad Evans by decision.
And then
his first loss.
He also lost to Chael Sonnen. So he's been kind of on that outer cusp, but he's never been able to break through until he was called up as a last minute replacement. So
yeah, and able obviously to make the best of his opportunity now. He's the middleweight champion. We'll see what's coming up the pipe for him.
Honestly, though, I kind of feel like he's going to be a transitional champion. I feel like it was nice that he was able to pull this, but like I said, he was an upset, and I just think there's better fighters out there. I think the contenders are probably someone's going to rise up, and someone's going to dethrone him really quickly. More than likely, Jacare. That's because that fight with Belfort was supposed to be a number one contenders fight, and I just think Jacare is just a better athlete overall. So it's nice that Michael Bisping could finally get this, but I don't think he's going to hold on a championship for so long, barring basically another upset. So
I feel the same way. I agree with you on just about every point you just made. But either way, taking nothing away from Bisping, he gets his moment in the sun. We'll see if he can maybe he can kind of parlay it into something a little bit more. But as for now, he's the middleweight champion. What else was I think there was another.
Well, just talking about that, I should like to note the fact that Bisping's clearly the latest in a series of fighters who've been like longtime veterans and were able to either revitalize their careers or straight up become a champion that would not have been expected otherwise. I think that trend started with probably Robbie Lawler, and then and then of course Risha Werdum was another one. So it's kind of gone to show you that you can't count out certain veterans.
You might be able to even lump Dominic Cruz into that.
True. Because of his injuries. He'd been out for a while. So, but he was able to come back and basically, and of course, for him, I think it's different with every fighter. But for him, clearly ring rust was not a factor. So it's nice. Yeah, it's nice to see that some fighters they're not completely down and out, even though they've been around for a while. So,
yeah. So speaking of Cruz, he also had a fight, a co-main event bout, a title bout, and that was against
Uriah Faber,
the California kid, WEC veteran.
Both of them WEC veterans.
Both gentlemen WEC veterans, now fighting under the banner of the UFC. This is their third. This was the rubber match.
Yep, the trilogy rubber match.
Uriah took the first one. Dominic took the second one, and here we were on Saturday, seeing them go at it one more time. How did this one pan out, Matt?
For the most part, Dominic Cruz controlled most of the fight, and one of the judges agreed with me, though, that I can't remember which round, but one of them he scored for Faber, but in the long term, that didn't really make much of a difference because Cruz dominated the fight for the most part throughout all the rounds. He was pretty consistent. Faber, did his best, but I don't think he really. Cruz is just on another level, and I just don't think Faber can compete with that. And we were talking before the podcast that I was saying Faber should maybe consider going down another weight class, maybe to obviously the only option left is flyweight. Maybe see if he can compete with Demetrius Johnson. So I don't know. We'll see how that goes.
What's interesting is Cruz might actually have benefited from the time that he's been able to take off, or that he's had to take off from his injuries, from his various injuries, and that he actually hasn't accumulated as much in-ring wear and tear as a lot of his contemporaries because of sort of these de facto vacations that he's taken away from the octagon and the cage. That might actually speak to why he comes across as so fresh, considering, especially like you mentioned, that he didn't seem to have, especially when you consider that he didn't seem to really have ring rust against TJ Dillashaw. He probably should have.
Yeah, or Takeya Mizugaki. Mizugaki was the real big question mark because that was his first fight after that long extended layoff. And then he took another extended layoff before he went against Dillashaw. But yeah, he doesn't really seem to show too much wear and tear. So yeah, that is certainly true. The fact that he just hasn't accumulated most of that wear and tear because of those long layoffs may also contribute to that. Now, I can't say the same for his leg, of course, because of where he's had to have all those surgeries. But yeah, certainly it could be a contributing factor to why he's so much of a better athlete. And just going back briefly to the Bisping Rockhold thing, I've noticed that in some weight classes there's been a lot of turnover in terms of the champions. This is true especially at heavyweight, middleweight, and I think it's just going to signify that just in some weight classes that the competition is just getting so much closer. And we saw that, of course, in the light heavyweight division right before John Jones rose, where the competition was just so close that it would, champion would arise every new fight or two. Now, whether that trend's going to keep going on, I have no idea, but we'll see in the long term how that all goes.
What's been set up for that more so has been the middleweight. We were just talking about it. This will really be, we'll set up this hypothetical where Bisping just won. He gets a title fight against Jacare Souza, and Jacare presumably is able to win that bout. It'll be the first time I think the middleweight division has its title bouncing around, right? I mean, it'll be the first time.
Yeah, because it's always kind of
when Evan Tanner to Rich Franklin to Anderson Silva.
Murdo Bustamante had it at one point. Wasn't he the first champion?
Yeah,
he was the first champion.
Yes, but they stripped him, and then they put on they stripped him, and because he went to Pride, and then they put on a vacated title bout between Dave Terrell and Evan Tanner. And then Evan Tanner's first defense was against Rich Franklin. Rich Franklin then defended it, I think, twice or three times.
Twice.
The fight against David Loazo wasn't a defense?
I think that was a defense, but it was one of those two.
So it would have been no, because he also defended it against Corey.
Yeah, that's two.
And you're right. It wasn't the fight for the title was the rematch between Rich Franklin and
Evan Tanner.
Evan
Tanner.
The first
fight
it was at 205. Yes, I forgot about that. So you're right. It was twice. And then he lost it to Anderson, who held it for a long time, and then Anderson lost it to Weidman, who was then able to defend it twice.
Yeah, Weidman defended it twice
against Anderson once and against
Machida.
Correcto mundo. Good man. Thank you. But now, presumably, if Bisping was to lose it again, it'd be the third champion.
Oh, no, 3 times. Go for it.
Okay.
All Brazilians.
Interesting. And then he lost it to the fellow American.
No, he lost it to the Brit.
Rockhold?
Oh, yeah, he did lose it. Oh, yeah, he did lose it to the fellow American. Yeah, never mind. I'm getting my fighters mixed up apparently.
So maybe it's the middleweight title's time to sort of float around for a little bit,
Yeah, because we had that dominant championship reign of Anderson Silva, and now it's starting to float around a little bit. It's kind of going through that same thing, and I don't know if that's also what's going to happen to the heavyweight belt, considering that something similar is happening. But the heavyweight belt, I don't think it's been defended more than 2 times, has it?
Like ever?
Yeah, ever.
Cain Velasquez. Didn't he defend it twice?
More than 2. Randy Couture defended against Pedro Rizzo twice. That was the longest reign that he had.
Sylvia, right? Sylvia had to. Oh, my goodness.
I don't think Sylvia defended more than 2 times either.
I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Continue on to the next one while I do research on this.
Okay, so then we had a featherweight match against Max Holloway and Ricardo Lamas.
Between Max Holloway and Lamas. And this one looked like a barn burner.
Holloway pretty much controlled the fight throughout. Lamas was more of the wrestler, but Holloway, for the most part, defended all the takedowns, won all 3 rounds. The end of the fight was especially entertaining, where
they were just winging on each other.
Yeah, Holloway didn't have to do that. He had all 3 rounds, but you risk getting knocked out at that point, but he stepped down to the middle of the ring like last 10 seconds, and he's pointing down. It's like, let's go. And they just wailed on each other. Holloway still got the better shots, but it was still one of those entertaining moments. Kind of brings you back to the original Forrest Griffin Bonner fight.
Yeah.
But it was one of those entertaining moments.
My gosh, I think you're right, Matt. I do not think any heavyweight titleist has ever been able to defend his title.
And there's only one fighter who's ever held the title more than 3 times, and that's been Randy Couture, or more than 2 times, and that's been Randy Couture.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Incredible stuff.
Yep. So, and then, moving on, speaking of legends, then another one of the pay-per-view fights was Dan Henderson versus Hector Lombard. And, we kind of already talked to this last week in the preview. I was kind of a little worried for Dan Henderson because he's definitely taking a lot of punishment.
Yeah, and you and I both showed some concern. We definitely sort of short-sold him.
But there were times when Henderson wasn't in trouble in this fight. Lombard actually got a few judo throws on him, kind of similar to Jake Shields. And yeah, the fight ended in a not so typical fashion. These guys are 2 heavy hitters. You wouldn't have thought that a back elbow would end the fight.
And
but Dan
Henderson, one sort of awkwardly timed one in the middle of like a sort of a scramble where it was kind of found himself sort of behind Henderson, to the side of him, sort of trying to wrap his arms around him, and Henderson just let her rip.
Yeah, and Henderson was just in one of those situations where it's like he just threw the elbow and then knocked out Lombard. Lombard just crumbled, and then
they fell together, but Lombard was out.
Yeah, and then Henderson followed it up with 2 more subsequent elbows,
and then prone to do.
Yeah, so. And then of note is that he said that he might be done. And I think that kind of signals the fact that he realizes he's kind of getting up there in not just age, he's 45, but also in mileage of, because he's been out there a lot longer than some fighters have. I mean, some fighters have called it quits, like Big Nog. Big Nog's a few years younger than him. He's already called that quits, and we already know that he's being inducted into the Hall of Fame. Speaking of which, they actually announced that also joining Big Nog this year in the Hall of Fame is going to finally be the Predator.
Don
Fry.
Wow.
Yep, Don Fry. Cool. They actually, they were showing a highlight reel that showed his UFC fights, and they showed some of his Pride fights, and they just showed that fight with I forget which Japanese pro wrestler was, but that fight where they were just wailing on just grabbing on the head and wailing each other. They actually showed part of that fight in this highlight reel. So I'm definitely glad that Don Fry is getting that induction. I think it's been long overdue. He definitely deserves it. I mean, he went out there and he was one of those guys who kind of
he won an early UFC tournament. I think he won like UFC 8 or something.
He won two tournaments, UFC 8, and it was the Ultimate 96. Okay. But yeah, he's finally being inducted into the Hall of Fame. He was again one of those guys, those old school, longtime veterans who just did not agree a lot with Dana White on the policy and stuff like that, and we'll talk about one incident in particular later that does not include Don Fry, but he's one of those guys who this has kind of been long overdue, and it's
definitely a charismatic personality in the world of mixed martial arts. It's shown through Pride and all.
Yeah, so. It's nice to see him finally getting this nomination. But anyways,
run down the rest of the card and preliminaries.
Okay, so the next fight was Dustin Poirier that opened up the pay-per-view part of the card. Dustin Poirier versus Bobby Green. Bobby Green had actually been a Strikeforce import, but he'd actually been sidelined with injuries for a while. Poirier, of course, has came up from featherweight after he lost to Conor McGregor, and he's been undefeated at lightweight since then, picking up another win against Mr. Green. So it's nice to see that happening. Then the prelims, we had Brian Ortega versus Clay Guida. Guida, of course, being a long-time established veteran. Ortega's up-and-comer, and he was able to finish off Guida with a knee. Then we had in the lightweight division, we had Beneil Dariush go against James Vick. Dariush was able to pull off a knockout as well. I feel like this was one of those fight cards that definitely delivered. And if it hadn't been overshadowed by several other things, which, as I said, we'll bring that up later. Several other things, it would have been one of the more talked about stuff in the MMA community, but
though, this being a card that delivered, the UFC in general, I think in the last probably maybe going on a year now, been putting together, and we've already spoke to maybe the UFC putting on less amounts of events has helped.
Yeah, because it was just that one time where when they started Fox Sports 1. I feel like Fox Sports 1 was when they launched Fox Sports 1. That's when the trouble started, because they'd still been doing select stuff on, Primetime Fox, FX, when Fox Sports 2 was Fuel TV. But then when they launched those two channels, Fox Sports 1 and Fox Sports 2, that's when things kind of got out of hand, because all of a sudden they started blitzing with all of these fight cards, and they're spreading their roster thin, and they just couldn't put together very good fight cards. And it was just one of those things where it's just like they were pretty much overextending themselves. Whereas as of late, with a few exceptional runs, yeah, they've kind of been cutting back a little bit. I think they realized we're overextending ourselves. We can't keep this up. So it's nice to see that. Yeah, they're slowly starting to put on better fight cards, because they're still putting talent, up and coming talent on the UFC fight nights, but because of that, they're able to kind of condense some of the more well-known guys, more established guys onto the pay-per-views, and yeah, that's because of that they're putting on better fight cards, and probably also saving them more for the UFC on Foxes as well, just because of the fact that UFC on Fox is more. It's UFC on Fox is the greatest opportunity to watch anything, which is why at one point they were actually putting on some title fights on there, because it's literally anyone who has a TV can watch it. Anyone who has a TV. That's, you can buy a cheap one and buy one of those HD antennas, and you can watch it. That's the best opportunity, which is why I think they're picking and choosing, because Fox Sports 1 they're still trying to gain some traction there, because it's the last of the major networks that is still trying to establish themselves in terms of the sports world. But yeah, that's why I feel like they're kind of putting on some more. It's where they're putting on that's up and comers, and maybe putting on some veterans on there. But so
yeah, it's been good. It's been a steady diet of very decent fight cards with very respectable main events that have resulted in some pretty fun sort of either finishes or all around sort of, or rather just even decisions that are sort of competitive, some good matchmaking, some sort of creative improvisation on their behalf as to who to throw in under short notice, etc. Dating back to considering going back even as far as the Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor sort of phenomenon of that weekend, and they're continuing on. I mean, UFC 200. I think UFC 200 should be an exciting fight card. That's a good follow up to this fight card. And,
we should probably talk about the news about UFC 200 that was broken at this event. Since we're talking about UFC 200.
Let's do it.
Okay, so the major thing is the news that Brock Lesnar is going to be appearing on UFC 200, and it was announced earlier this week that he'll be fighting Mark Hunt. So it was kind of funny. This was done really well, and again, we'll talk about this later, but I was not on social media. The only thing I did was post that I'm watching UFC 199. That's the only thing I posted on social media. I didn't see anything else. So I did not know about any type of rumors that Brock was going to appear on UFC 200. So they do the trailer. They show the they show 6 people on the title fights. And then towards the very end of this trailer, they just show Brock in the octagon. It's like, towards the camera, I was just like, and my first expression was, what?
So surprise reveal.
And I think Joe Rogan probably didn't know either, because he had a similar reaction, and it's hard to fake a genuine reaction from Joe Rogan.
Yeah, the guy's a pretty authentic fellow.
I think Mike Goldberg is I'm not sure if Mike Goldberg's just good at keeping his cool or if he already knew, but he was just like, so Brock Lesnar on UFC Twitter is like, and of course Joe Rogan's going crazy, but I was just like, my genuine reaction was just, what? Because I was not expecting it, because he's under contract from WWE, which WWE later on verified this is a one-off. He's still under contract, but this is a one-off, and this is almost a promotion for kind of his appearing at SummerSlam. He is going to appear at SummerSlam. So,
you know,
yes,
matching up against Mark Hunt, I don't know. That seems a little bit intense for somebody who you would think Dana White might want to protect, just because, you know, he's a draw.
Yeah, my first thought was is that one of two things is going to happen. This is either going to be just a my first thought was this is going to be a squash match. If they don't have anyone a month out, then this is probably just a squash match. That was my thought, is that they're going to throw a nobody in there who's just going to be mercifully destroyed. But Hunt is not someone to be taken lightly.
Not at all.
Because, yeah, he's pulled some upsets in the past, and he is a heavy hitter. He connects with Brock's chin, and we saw what Alistair Overeem did to Brock. Now, granted, Hunt's no Alistair Overeem. He does not have the body of an Dantis. He's got more the body of a sumo wrestler. Yes, but he still cannot be taken lightly by Brock. I mean, Brock needs to look. It's like from the get-go, Brock needs to look to take this fight down, and did what he's done to several other fighters, which is just destroyed them. He cannot. This is not one of those things that he could take lightly. Hunt is not like Heath Herring, where you punch him and that throw the force of the punch not only breaks your orbital bone but throws you into a somersault. This is not Hunt is not that type of guy. He can take a punch and he can give a punch. So if
Brock is definitely going to have to go in with a solid game plan, a smart one. Where he's able to nullify. Hunt sort of, Hunt is your prototypical one-dimensional striker MMA fighter, where he does his best to maybe not be taken down.
Well, he was a K1 champ.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's
but Brock is going to need to fight the exact opposite style, which is to
this is your typical striker versus grappler matchup.
Yeah,
what we're looking at here.
And on the biggest scale.
Yes, definitely. So that's I'd still like to talk about UFC 199, and this is basically events surrounding. Yeah, some events surrounding UFC 199. This is the white elephant in the room, and I just showed before the show. I showed Edson the itinerary. Most of this is regarding this particular incident.
Dive right into it.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to say that the reason why we went over UFC 199 first is because that's how you're supposed to cover the news. This is an MMA event where we're covering an MMA event podcast. That's why we did this. Yeah. But when something happens to a fellow reporter, and I because of the prestige of this individual in particular, it's hard to say fellow reporter, considering I don't feel like we're on the same level. I don't know how you feel, but I don't feel like we're on the same level as this individual. But
as the most successful MMA journalist.
So let's just break it. So we're talking about Ariel Helewani. Mm-hmm. Now, for those of you who don't know, and if you don't read journalism or sports journals, you're not going to know this. But Ariel Helewani, and I actually heard about this from Gabe. Our
Mr. Keith.
Yes, Mr. Keith, one of our founders at the website, with MMA Freak. So, got the news that Ariel Helewani, right before the main event, got called in the back by Dana White, and he's told that he's banned for life, and he not just him, but his videographer and MMA photographer Esther Lynn, who I use a lot of her photos, were all escorted out of the building.
Wow.
All escorted out right before the main event.
Wow. Was there a specific justification for this?
So the incident, this is my understanding, is that according to Ariel Helewani, and I've gone through multiple interviews with him, including the MMA Hour podcast that he does regularly on MMA fighting. I went through several different other interviews, and he keeps saying the same thing. It was this was actually confirmed by the UFC through one of their PR guys, is that he reported on the news of Brock Lesnar earlier than the UFC did. He found out about it. He went through multiple sources, and he posted it. So
in the UFC's eyes, he spoiled a surprise.
Yeah, and they later said that the reason why they ejected him was because, and let me try pulling up the quote.
Keep in mind those that might hear this and not really wrap their heads around, and I'm sure there's nobody that might, but still, those that might not know who Ariel Helewani is. He is the premier mixed martial arts journalist, sort of very well established for at least half a decade or so now.
At one point was the host of UFC Tonight. That post is now filled by Karen Bryant.
So has been.
Who's also another well-established reporter.
Has been as inside as you could possibly get. Is as inside as you could possibly get, and is really a man, seemingly of integrity, a man who takes journalism seriously as it should be taken, and the UFC goes and pulls something funky like this. Yeah.
So I couldn't find an exact quote, but apparently, according to Dave Scholler, who's a UFC spokesman, apparently what happened was, as I said, Helewani reported it, and the justification they said was that he did not notify the promotion that he was going to announce the news that he'd gotten. First of all, and I'm going to talk about as someone who's Edson and I, we both took classes. We both received formal journalism training from Santa Ana College, and which is the best JC journalism program in the nation. Also, it's counted among the top 10, maybe even top 5 journalism schools in the country. Yeah. Not just JC's, journalism schools. Yeah. And Ariel Helewani comes from Syracuse, who's also is one of the best journalism schools in the nation.
That's serious business.
So nowhere. I mean, we can look it up. Because I've got my journalism books, and if you want, I will. I'm a little hesitant to, but we could easily take PDF post in the instructions where nowhere in the instructions does it say you do not have to notify a source once you've got the info. Yeah. As long as it's verified by 2 or more people, that's news. You post it, and that's what Ariel did.
Yeah.
And the UFC essentially punished him for it because he got news out that they wanted out first. And I'm just going to go back to now. I'm just also going to say that Ariel Helewani has since been reinstated because, I'm going to tell you right now, the reason why he was reinstated, and this all happened on Tuesday. It was the day. Monday, so 2 days after he was supposedly banned for life, he was reinstated. But we're still going over the principle of the thing.
Let's hear it. Spit it out.
the UFC just does not understand journalism. I don't know if they're not hiring the right PR people who usually come from a journalism background or whatever. Or sometimes they'll come from a journalism background, sometimes they don't. But I don't know why they just don't understand it, but they don't understand journalism.
Well, I listened to an interview yesterday with Ariel Helewani, and the way that he described it is the UFC should be viewed less as a sports league with commissioners and more as a sports team with a manager. And that is to say that the Fertittas and Dana White are sort of management positions, and that just the same way that an owner of a basketball team, say, is allowed to bar a journalist from being in a venue, the UFC sort of treats their journalists the same way.
Which is ironic considering that Dana White likes to refer to the UFC as a league. That's very ironic, and you're treating it like a sports team. That's
but that's still that's exactly right. That not very many people would view it that way. A lot of people would view it as, hey, this is the premier fight organization, the one that you would want to have reported on the most thoroughly. I mean, in a lot of ways, because you're going to want to be able to shine a light in the most in ways that people might be able to connect with. You could really only get that through some real hardline and expert sort of journalism. And Ariel Helewani is a gentleman who has time and time again displayed his expertise on the subject. And to sort of over something as petty as just breaking news before you got a chance to sort of maximize the marketability of it by making it a surprise, it's just super selfish. And when you say that they don't understand journalism, I think it's more that they don't care. They don't care, and they simply just, I mean, in some ways it's censorship, I guess it could be viewed that way, where it's just like, hey, you know what? We don't want you here reporting the facts. And it's a bummer because you get folks like you and I, and you mentioned earlier when we spoke that it might motivate you, but really, I mean, it has to have a chilling effect on those that would one day want to reach the heights of somebody like Ariel Helewani and think to themselves, am I just going to end up being blackballed and told that I'm finished by Dana White?
Well, yeah, I love nothing more. Yeah, I've come straight out. I'm not you can't be afraid to go head to head with Dana White, and when it comes to stuff like this, you just can't, because he's a very strong personality. He's just, I think he could if he'd actually trained, he could be a fighter, because he just got that personality, that bully. I hate to use this word, but he's got a bully personality, he's basically just used the same tactic on Ariel Helewani that he uses on fighters to get his stuff done, and that's why he's in trouble with this UFC lawsuit, is because a lot of those same tactics that he has used over the years, that just bully tactics, these ways of getting his way, are being listed in this UFC lawsuit, which is why I keep saying, if this comes before the right judge and the judge looks at this and says, I have no doubt that if Dana White were there, he'd say, you are a bully. Yeah. The right judge would, and what can Dana White do? It's like, what's he gonna do? Yell at the guy and get thrown out for contempt of court? It's like, I have no. It's like the right. It's like I said, if this comes before the right judge, maybe even any judge, I'm sure that if all the stuff that's been listed comes before, or if some of this comes before any judge, there's gonna be a payout regardless. And the UFC had better just start thinking about how they could settle, honestly, because if this, like I said, this comes before a judge and the judge starts looking through this stuff, it's not gonna go well. And this is just the latest example. For all we know, Ariel could hop on, because it's a class action lawsuit. He could hop on it if he wanted to. I don't think he is, because he wants to be a journalist. He doesn't want, and multiple sources that I've seen, he doesn't want to be the center of attention, because he's a journalist. Yeah. Journalists report the news.
They don't want to be the news.
We've been taught that. He's been taught that. If you're a good journalist, you've been taught that. You are not the news. You report the news. And he's being made a martyr for the sake of journalists. I mean, this was a huge PR nightmare for the UFC. It was huge. It was just a nightmare. Like I said, they could have been every other show could have been doing the same thing that we've done right now. We could have talked about UFC 199, the dream of Michael Bisping rising up. We could have talked about all of that. We could have talked about Brock Lesnar. We could have talked about everything that we talked about. We could have talked about that, and then we could have talked about some of the other stuff that we're going to be talking about later in the show. Instead, here we are talking about the fact that Ariel Helewani.
This is the biggest piece of news to come out from that weekend, and this was a weekend when, really, frankly, one of the bigger upsets, especially in the last 3 years of title fights, occurred, and it gets sort of reduced to this, and this is a bad sort of PR situation for the UFC to be.
Yeah, and with the fact that, and like I said, Ariel Helewani, to his embarrassment, but also to his credit as a reporter, because of how good he is, he was just made a martyr. It's like Dana White wanted to bury him. He made him a martyr for journalism. And the reason, I have no doubt, the reason why they reversed that decision is because he realized we screwed up big time. Because everyone was talking about Ariel Helewani. They weren't talking about Michael Bisping. They were talking about Brock Lesnar. And one of the things that Dana, apparently, according to Helewani, I doubt if, I don't know if his videographer would be willing to confirm that. I don't know who was present. I don't know if Dana White would be willing to confirm that. I doubt Dana White's going to want to talk about this at all because frankly, it's an embarrassment. But apparently what he said was Brock got upset that you reported this early, and also he said you're too negative, Lorenzo Fertitta, because apparently Lorenzo Fertitta is the one who ultimately made this decision. But apparently he said Lorenzo Fertitta considers you too negative. What's so negative about the facts? The facts are neutral.
The truth hurts, I think, is really what you're trying to say there. And, Dana White is a control freak, tries to control the messaging. It's frustrating to think about. And, hopefully things like this happen less and less concurrently. And we could focus on, on really the fascinating sport of mixed martial arts.
Yeah, well, and something else, that... and this just goes to his character, because and it just when I watched the whole MMA Hour podcast yesterday. Because I kind of felt like in order to understand everything, I went and watched him, and he talked about the timeline of how his being involved with Fox and how basically he still wanted to be a reporter because deep down inside, he's a reporter. He's just like us. He wants to go out there. He wants to report the facts. That's what he wants to do. But when he was the host of UFC tonight, he was, I guess they just expected him to be a host. They literally just expected him to be a host and read the news. But he, being the reporter, he's finding out this stuff, and he's like, can I report this? Can I report this? And he went with the quote-unquote UFC policy before. And guess what happened? He was other people, they fed it to other people.
Yeah.
So it's just, I don't know. And he also talked about how people like us, and that reminds me of when I first met him at Invicta. Was it 10? I think it was Invicta 10. I met him at Invicta 10 at the Shrine Auditorium, and I told him I told him I consider you the top person. I look to become you, and he told me it's an honor to meet you. And my thought was, oh my gosh,
this guy's a freaking consummate pro.
Yeah, and I was just like, but that just goes back to his character. He was on the show, and he's saying how honored he is that people come out like that to tell him. Guess what? I was one of those people, and he was talking about how he's our up and comers supposed to be afraid of that happening to them, and you know what? I'm not afraid of that because I can't really get any worse than I am right now. I'm not getting into the UFC events. I'm not. I might be interviewing people here and there, but we interviewed Ashley Yoder before she went on The Ultimate Fighter, and we might be talking to people in time, but
But for right now, we're just trying to sort of make our way.
Yeah, but right now we're just trying to make our way, and we can't get, like I said, we can't get any worse than we are right now. It's not, and it's like I don't have anything to lose, so. And like I said, this just motivates me because if you're going to deal with a person like Dana White, you can't have any fear. And towards the end of his interview, and it became difficult to watch toward the end because and I can understand why some people might criticize him for taking up the whole podcast to talk about himself, but he wanted to put everything out in the clear, and so. So if
it's an uncomfortable spot. I feel like he doesn't. Oh, as if there was any way for Dana White to make me be annoyed by him anymore. I think this is one of them. I thought that the top of the top was his threatening to have a boxing fight with Tito Ortiz. I thought, like, this is as obnoxious as this man will ever get.
I think that was actually more Tito Ortiz as the man.
But still, Dana White agreeing to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Sort of really narcissistic. It's like, dude, you're not the... he wants to be the star. He wants to be the face of the UFC. And it's like, dude, move aside. Let this thing sort of grow,
Yeah, so... But yeah, so it was some...
Yeah,
I'm almost at a loss because I've been going on this huge rant, and it's like maybe I'm getting it. Maybe I've gotten it out of my system, but the overall point is, and another thing that he brought up in, and I don't remember if I think it was more an interview, but Ariel brought up a fact about there's kind of fraternity of MMA journalists, and I can for one say that I definitely feel that because I've talked you and I obviously we're on the same journalism team, and then of course the guys Tom Heffernan, Gabe Keith, John. My brother. We Ted to a degree because he's loosely connected with us. But people, all of us, we're all on the same journalism team, so we're all kind of connected. But then there's people outside that we talk to on a regular basis. Like I talk with Robert from Fanboy Nation on a regular basis. I talk with Amy, who's been with a few different sites on a regular basis. She's a photographer, so. Yeah, there's definitely kind of a fraternity. We stick together. We report the MMA news. And, like Ariel said, there's not a lot of full-time paying jobs for in this out there. And, we're here at the bottom. Hopefully we could at some point start doing this for a living. I would like nothing more because I love that saying where if you love your job, you don't work a day in your life. Yeah. If we could do this for as a living, this would not be work. This would literally be just a part of our lives.
To show how much of a passion we have for it, that we do it is just sort of this hobby. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is what we love. We try to inform ourselves as much as we can. We try to have honest opinions that are informed, and we try to put that out into the world through the form of this podcast and the website. And then we just do our best. It's tough. It's tough, but it's fun.
And I'd like to read part of that quote when the UFC rescinded that ban. And this part of it, keep in mind, because the whole thing talks about talking to the editorial team at MMA Fighting, but this one part, in our opinion, we believe the recurring tactics used by its MMA Fighting's lead reporter extend beyond the purpose of journalism. As journalists, this has been a pretty uniform across the board saying, as journalists, he did nothing wrong. It's like if you wanna it's like Dana White, if you want to do your own like little UFC journalism school and you want to do your own thing, fine. Then that extends beyond the purpose of journalism.
Could you imagine a reality TV show with a bunch of guys in a house and they're going to become the premier UFC journalists?
Yeah. But as far as work as you know, and this just goes to show it went across the board. Everyone's saying Ariel Helewani did nothing wrong. And I remember reading that article by Kevin Iola. I honestly thought Kevin Iola was going to do something neutral. He was, and it just goes to show, Ariel's character. He just went out there and basically chewed out. It was almost like he was chewing out the UFC. He went out there for him, and it's like just a whole bunch of people. It's like I said, the good news journalists were all coming down on the UFC because of that. It was negative on what the UFC did. Like I said, it was a PR nightmare, and I know that the reason why they reversed that decision was pressure from everybody else. They realized it's a PR nightmare. We are suffering for this. Yeah. It's like I said, that word journalism, they don't understand it. They think journalists are free advertising. That's what they think.
That's what they want it to be.
That's what they want to be. That's not journalism. Journalism is going out there finding the facts. Yeah. And like our mentor said, Charles Little, Bud. He's the like I said, the professor, the journalism professor at Santa Ana College, mm-hmm. He said that I lost my train of thought.
Regarding integrity.
There's a price to. Well, that's one of the things he said. That's a price to integrity, but. I feel okay.
No, I mean it's a tough situation. You know, all we could do is keep on doing it, keep on moving, keep on keeping on. Not only that, but hey, there's a spot for them to start letting start giving us our press credentials and start going to the UFCs and whatnot.
Well, like it's I think because we're under a time schedule, we probably should start going on with other stuff. But it's just
finishing thoughts on the matter.
I just like I said, I'm probably all talked out. I think the UFC really needs to take a look at this. Dana White, Lorenzo Fertitta in general. These guys need to look at this. And one other quote I love: "The pen is mightier than the sword." Yeah. This has definitely been the case, or in this case, the pen is mightier than the glove.
Yeah.
But this is definitely the case. They've been this. They're these multi-billionaires. They're being destroyed by these guys who. I can guarantee most of them don't make 7 digits. I can guarantee most of these guys probably make. I'm wondering if maybe even some of these guys make 6 digits. But the point is, they're being destroyed by these people they're just being destroyed by these people who have the same thing. They're out there. They're journalists. They go out there. They get the facts. They report the facts. That's what they do. The truth and nothing but the truth. That's what they go out there and they report. That is what journalism is. That is what journalism is. If Dana White can't understand that, which has been pointed out, there's been times that he's either not said anything when someone asks a question or straight up lies. And I'm sure that we could look it up. I remember there was apparently one quote that someone asked if Brock was going to fight at UFC 200. I don't know if it just wasn't in the cards at the time or whether he was straight up lying. But he said Brock is not going to be at UFC 200. It's just Dana White's integrity when it comes to MMA is selective. It obvious, when the whole Anderson Silva taking a dive thing came up, that was one of those times where I was saying I'm willing to go out to bat for Dana White. This is not one of those times where I'm willing to go out to bat for Dana White. I'm going to hit him with the bat. Just like everyone else has. Everyone else has beat me to the punch. He's already lying on the ground with a bunch of broken bones. But the point is, it's like I said, he doesn't understand journalism, and he's suffered greatly for that. I don't know. I'm sure the UFC will recover from that because they have loyal fans, but the fact of the matter is they don't understand journalism, and they really need to watch what they're doing in the future. Because it's like it's frustrating. If you want to get on the public eye, guess what fans look for first? They look on the internet. Who posts on the internet? Us. The journalists of the world. We go out there, and guess what? It's the specialty ones in particular, MMA Fighting, MMA Weekly, Sheer Dog. It's those of us in particular who go out there and report the news. Because that's where everyone looks to. Because as often, there's just aren't a lot of mainstream outlets that view it. Bleacher Report, yeah. LA Times is selective. Most of them are selective because they like going after the bigger sports. We're not mainstream yet. And until then, the specialty outlets are just going to be those places that fans look to. Those, it's the internet age. They look to the internet. And the internet sites are the ones that go out there and report stuff. And Dana White needs to learn to respect that. He can't, it's not, it's like the UFC is only going to get so much news out there because guess what? They're not hiring, their reporters aren't as good because they only want their stuff out there. Whereas reporters get all sides. So this is one of those things where hopefully Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta learn that you can't just do something like that to someone who's got a clear track record so
somebody who should respect.
Yeah, which I get the idea he is, but
it's infuriating to think about. Matt, what's up next? What do you want to quickly sort of bolt?
Okay.
We got about like half an hour.
Okay, so I know that I'll try to keep the positive. I'll try to I hate to go from one negative note to another negative note, but I kind of feel like we need to. I'll try to keep some of the more positive stuff on the end, so maybe we could end on a high note. So the one of the negative notes is that apparently Ronda Rousey is getting knee surgery, and she will not be fighting again until minimum December.
Darn it, I didn't know this.
Until minimum December. So that's apparently that's something that's going on there. So she if Miesha Tate fights in between now and December, she's going to be fighting somebody else. She's not going to be fighting Ronda. So then another down note. This is kind of this might be more sobering than even the whole Ariel Helewani incident, but recent passings in the combat sports community.
Oh goodness!
The first one, definitely a legend in the sport, Muhammad Ali.
Might have been the day after we did the podcast last week.
Born. I think it was Friday actually.
So 2 days. 3
Yeah.
days,
So
2 days
born Cassius Clay, Jr. He and he'd been dealing with Parkinson's for a while. Years. And I read a quote that said, Layla Ali saying that, her father was trapped in his beat up broken body and that he was finally free now. But he was a legend, and a lot of kind of like the more psychological parts of his of that are kind of in the UFC today. You look at Conor McGregor; he very much, fashions.
Muhammad Ali was probably the earliest
smack talker,
successful smack talker. In such a way though that he was able to, really rattle his opponents, really sort of sell a fight, really sort of back up his smack talking. Really sort of get people excited for something, And, you know, there was nobody, and he was great, you know, he was a great improvisational speaker. He was great in interviews. He has several legendary interviews with Howard Cosell. You know, you know, he had so many classic boxing fights under his belt.
Frazier.
Yeah, notably starting with the Sonny Liston knockout. Yeah, and like you said, Joe Frazier, the Rumble in the Jungle with George Foreman. You know, 3 matches with Frazier, and one of the most enduring sports figures in the history of the United States. A activist, right?
Yeah.
A member of the Nation of Islam. You know, famously sort of
dodged the draft.
Famously a draft dodger, but if there was ever a disgraceful war, some might argue that the Vietnam War was the one.
Yeah, that was just too political. Did we ever go into the North?
We lost that one hard.
Did we actually? It's like, did we actually invade the North? In North Korea, we actually invaded the North. Did we actually invade the North? We just dropped bombs. That's literally all we did. Yeah. That's all we did. We dropped bombs, and we didn't even drop bombs on the important stuff. We never went into Hanoi and dropped
bad news. Dude.
It was.
It was a decade of a generation just sort of torn into pieces, and
yeah, that's where the hippie culture. I think that's not where the first counterculture came out, but that was kind of that idea. It's like,
well, coming right out of the civil rights movement and sort of like moving into that sort of culture.
It kind of went from where
shell shock.
It's kind of where they're trying to like push back to a level of even, and then they kind of went up that.
Yeah.
It was just
didn't help.
It was a mess. It was a mess.
Yeah.
But another interesting thing is that during Muhammad Ali's prime, and John actually went over this in his obituary.
Which by the way for dodging the draft, he was actually barred from professional boxing for 3 years, stripped of his title and barred. And those are 3 years during, you know, your prime athletic years. You know, that's kind of one of the most tragic things to come about the entire.
Oh, and an interesting note. There was actually this episode of Pawn Stars where someone actually, or was it Pawn Stars? It was something. I'd like to say it was Pawn Stars, but I may be wrong. It was an episode of Pawn Stars where someone walked in with a letter from, I think it was, I can't remember if it was actually from Muhammad Ali or whether it was from his manager, but they were asking the Alaska State Athletic Commission or Boxing Commission or whatever it was if they'd be willing to issue him a license. Alaska! He was that desperate to get fights, but because he was dodging the draft, they were like no, yeah. So
wait, I didn't know if you were going to touch on this, but Muhammad Ali actually was a sort of a participant in one of the earliest sort of prototypical mixed martial arts.
That's what I was going. Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up. So because I lived in Japan and because I kind of grew up in this culture and this kind of legend. This is why I know about this. And as I said, John, same thing, which is why he wrote the obituary. And I'm pretty sure they were probably talking about this all over the news in Japan. But in what was the date for that?
It had to be in the 70s. Just taking a shot in the dark.
June 26, 1973. It was so Muhammad Ali was actually in a mixed rules match with Japanese pro wrestler Antonio Inoki, and as you said, this was kind of a prototype for MMA, but it was this was this match where Inoki and Ali, they were in a fight together, and it was basically because Inoki was actually known as a legit grappler. He, unlike a lot of pro wrestlers nowadays that do not know how to grapple, back then it was typical to still get actual grappling experience, and that was especially true in Japan, and that's still true in Japan to a degree. I mean, most most pro wrestlers have some kind of grappling experience in Japan. So he and Ali, I heard that at times Vince McMahon was actually involved in the negotiations for this, but they did this mixed rules match in Tokyo, Japan, and basically the rules were that and of note is that Inoki wasn't just Inoki was definitely a early mixed martial artist, because he wasn't just a grappler. He also was trained in karate. Mm-hmm. So he had both that grappling and that standing experience. Well, this was originally supposed to be just a like pro wrestling bout, like similar to what you saw with Hulk Hogan and what's his name?
Whoever. So as you see in the WWF.
I was pointing towards it would be comparable. Originally, it was supposed to just be comparable to that bout in Rocky with Rocky 3, where Hulk Hogan came out as Thunderlips, and he and Sylvester Stallone kind of had that grappling thing. It was supposed to be like a little bit of. It was supposed to be a playful thing, but it was they showed Hogan shooting, and that was actually the fear, is that this was supposed to be originally be a work. But Ali's camp was afraid that Inoki would turn it into a shoot. And so what they did was they changed the rules a few different times, and the final rule set was that Inoki couldn't grapple and he couldn't throw a high kick because of that karate background. He couldn't throw a high kick unless his knee was down. The whole fight consisted of Inoki doing these weird drop kicks and then kicking off of his back against Inoki.
Those were sort of the modified rules, right?
Yeah, those were the modified rules, and this went on the whole fight, and it was done. The length of the fight was boxing rules. It was 15 3-minute rounds, and it goes the whole round. They declared a draw because at one point Inoki actually went against that rule of grappling. Yeah. But he was a more active person, so they called it a draw. But it was and it was actually very unpopular at the time, but it has since become revered as like I said, a prototype fight to modern MMA. So I think that's kind of, in addition to his whole smack talk and stuff like that. And they didn't cover this at UFC 199. I should note that during all of UFC 199, they're talking about Muhammad Ali, remembering the legend Muhammad Ali. But they did not talk about that one bout, because
it was sort of a weird chapter. It was sort of a weird chapter in his career. I think a lot of boxing. I think a lot of boxing historians look at it actually as a low point in his career, where he was trying to cut a check after he had sort of seen the boxing venue or in the boxing avenue, which is strange, because I think that a lot of mixed martial arts.
Well, he was the reigning heavyweight champion at the time, WBA and WBC at the time.
I think it was still sort of on the tail end of his career. He was about to lose to Larry Holmes. He let his career go on probably a little bit too long. I don't know if right then would have been sort of when that was already sort of getting towards a little bit long in the tooth, but even still sort of displaced from the prime of his career. And yeah, who knows?
Well, that's Muhammad Ali in a nutshell. And then the other passing 5 days later. Let's see.
Yeah.
Let's see. Ali. When did actually, I think it was like. It was like 4. It was like, I'd like to say like 4 days. 3. Let's see. Three days later, Kimbo Slice passed away.
Yeah. Kevin Ferguson.
3 days apart.
Of Florida. I don't know if he was born there.
He was originally born in Nassau, Bahamas. But yeah, he was born, and let's just call him basically a guy who lived the American dream. He came from the Bahamas with his family, and then he at one point he was actually a pretty good football player. He was actually at one point on the preseason squad for the Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, and so he's a pretty good football player. And he was at one point connected with the Reality Kings porn.
That's
porn,
sort of how he got his initial start.
And apparently he maintained ties with that. Company until his death. But it was while he was with them that he started doing the internet street fights. And then from there, that's how his popularity rose. Is that he would go out there and do these street fights. They'd be posted on the internet, and eventually, the first promotion to actually give him a match was actually Cage Fury Fighting Championships, which is actually known for putting on some pretty good regional shows. So he went against Ray Mercer. I later found out the reason why it wasn't an actual, it was an exhibition was because they thought Ray Mercer would murder Kimbo. So they wouldn't. The commission wouldn't. The New Jersey State Athletic Commission wouldn't sanction it as an actual match. So
Ray Mercer was, I think, an ex-heavyweight boxing titleist, and sort of had a pretty hefty resume of professional boxing fights. And Kimbo came up as a street fighter with really no sanction bouts, so it's sort of a tough situation to be put in if you're the commission. You don't want to put up a professional fighter against a relative someone who you might look at as a relative amateur.
Yeah, and then they go out there, and ironically enough, Kimbo won the fight by guillotine.
Yeah.
So, and that's how he got his first call out. After that, Upstart Pro Elite did Elite XC, and he goes out there and starts. Bo Cantrell was kind of always just a can. I don't think he's really done anything since then. But fought Bo Cantrell. Then he goes out and fights an old Tank Abbott. An old Tank Abbott. And then he goes out and fights James Thompson. And I don't think people realize, even though, no, he was not the most technical fighter. Kimbo Slice was never the most technical fighter. He never was, either at the beginning of his career or towards the end of his MMA career.
Yeah.
But his fame is what helped MMA rise to the mainstream. And I kind of wrote a little mini obituary in my weekly Around the World of MMA column. And I kind of mentioned that is that he headlined the first prime time network television MMA event on Elite XC Primetime. Yeah. And that's obvious to some people. That may be an embarrassment, but to me, who's a historian, that was history. That was history in the making. Yeah. And
absolutely.
That was that infamous fight where he goes out against James Thompson.
Oh my God!
And pops Thompson's ear in the third.
One of the most disgusting things that happened.
Yeah.
Mixed martial arts game. Josh Thompson's a clown for not draining that thing before the fight.
Well,
that was the size of a small golf ball.
Well, Leslie Smith did the same thing at UFC 180 in Mexico City, where Jessica I hit her here just right, and it didn't explode like James Thompson's ear. James Thompson's ear exploded. It's like I think there was just a little pop, and then it drained out. Jessica I hit Leslie Smith's ear, and her ear explodes. You saw all the blood and liquid just go.
Oh my God!
It was.
You just see a spray into the air.
Yeah, you saw it spray into the air, and then later they had to call the fight because her ear was just flopping all over the place.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. was ridiculous.
But yeah, then there was the James Thompson fight, and then he was supposed to fight Ken Shamrock at Elite XC Heat, and Shamrock gets a cut during warm-ups, and they call Seth Petrozelli.
Yeah.
And Petrozelli
actually had fought some fights in the UFC, I think, at this point.
Yeah, he had an actual MMA
kind
experience.
Of a journeyman, not really
He'd been the Ultimate Fighter. He'd been in quite a few things. So then it was a jab.
It was a very short left hook. It was like a very, very, it was very similar to the Nick Diaz, Robbie Lawler knockout, where it's just backing up.
I remember for the longest time, Petrozelli was known as the Kimbo Slayer.
Yeah.
Because he was the first one to give him his legit first loss. Yeah, then after that, it was that actually caused Elite XC to fold.
Yeah,
and
that was one of the biggest sort of yeah.
And I heard that Kimbo was offered a lot of different offers. He was just because of the fact that Coker didn't have a lot of money because he put all that money in that Strikeforce, Strikeforce buying out the Elite XC assets. Because of that buyout, I don't think he had a lot of money to throw around, so he wanted a legit promotion. Yeah. So he had, I remember reading at the time he wasn't really thinking about. He never even really considered Kimbo at the time. So, and I actually heard that Kimbo was actually offered money to go do pro wrestling in Japan or do some of those more freak show matchups in Japan, because Dream was there at the time, and that was kind of one of those things where it was post Pride. They were saying, "Oh, come over here, and we'll do some freak show matches." I could have just seen him go against Bob Sapp.
Yeah, absolutely.
Honestly, I would have actually liked to have seen some of those free show matchups. Match him up against Butterbean, match him up against Bob Sapp. I want to see this.
That's sort of.
I legitimately wanted to see that because I'm
the sort of thing that he would have lent himself to.
Like I said, to a degree, I'm still a Japanese MMA fan, and I would have liked to have seen some of those freak show type matchups, but Kimbo wanted to be serious, and he wanted to go into the UFC. And Dana White said, the only way you're going to go into UFC is he goes to the Ultimate Fighter. He went to the Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah.
And I remember that episode where he was going to fight was I think that's still. I'd like to say that's still the most watched season in the history of the Ultimate Fighter. So that's another thing, is that Kimbo was able, because of that draw, is that history was often made with him in MMA. Not because of his skills, because he was never the technical fighter, but he definitely had he definitely was able to draw that. And he then he also made history with Bellator. He did some and in between the UFC, because he won the UFC after the Ultimate Fighter lost to Roy Nelson in the first match. In between he tried to do a boxing career, didn't do very well, and then he did a little bit of a movie career, which was those cameo things. To sum it up, did Bellator, did a few things there. And he finally fought Ken Shamrock. That was
just last year, but it was a big sort of a draw in terms of ratings.
It was he also set some records for Bellator there as well. And as we talked about, that last fight with Dada 5000 was not pretty, but then he died from congenital heart failure. I've been reading around that he apparently was told that he needed a heart transplant. Unfortunately, that didn't come to fruition. Yeah, it didn't come to fruition, and he passed away. And
sort of a tragic loss of a couple of sports figures, that are sort of on opposite sides of
the spectrum.
Yeah, really. Matt, can you send us off, because we need to go to the restroom really bad.
Okay. I will just do a few more quick things,
please.
So So just to look for the UFC 199 was the first time that the California State Athletic Commission was doing their new weigh-in system, where it's not this thing where they all weigh in at one time. It's that they weigh in as they make weight, starting at 10 a.m. I think it was like a 4-hour time span, and that's actually more in line with like not high school or college weigh-ins, but that was more in line with with more of an international wrestling weigh-in, where there's like a window in which you weigh in, and during that window you just need to make weight.
Yep.
And you step on the scale, you make weight. That's it. That's what they did. It was they just made weight at the from 10 a.m. the day before to I think it was like a 4-hour window, and they had a fan weigh-in where they stepped on the scale. I think that was probably more just for that was just more for show. They were already rehydrating by then, so they stepped on the scale and stuff. And this is supposed to be a supposedly this is obviously California Athletic Commission is pioneering this, but this should be a start towards a more standard thing. But okay, there's that.
Thank you.
There's that. Then there's 2 more things. So Fedor is going to fight Fabio Maldonado on, I think it's European Fight Night 50. This is going to be on June.
Wait, hold on. What do you mean? UFC?
No, European Fight Night.
Oh, okay, I got confused. Okay. I thought it was a fight night in Europe.
It's the 17th, and this is actually going to be on broadcast on UFC Fight Pass.
Oh, check that out.
Yeah. So and then the last thing is the Freestyle World Cup. This is an annual team competition. It's basically a dual competition. The Freestyle World Cup is going to be this weekend at the Forum in Los Angeles. So that should be interesting. I think it's depending upon your schedule. It may or may not go.
Yeah. I might have to work that day, but I'll definitely keep you posted.
Okay, and I have, because of how short notice you suggested we go, I haven't even asked if we'll be able to get.
We might be able to finagle our way in there.
I haven't asked if we could get press credentials,
yeah.
I'll see if we can get press credentials. If not, I forget what the ticket prices are. I think the nosebleeds are like $18, maybe. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so that's it. Also, don't forget that for those of fans who want to be a part of our rankings process, we are now doing an open voting process at the MMAforum.com. So go on there, go into the UFC section, and it's usually going to be like an MMA Freak or open MMA Freak rank ballot thread or something like that. So go on there if you want to be a part of our rankings. So that's it for this week.
That's good, man.
Yep.
Cool podcast.
Yep.
We snuck some stuff in there.
Yes, we did.
It was a little shorter, I think, but it was good.
A little shorter. I think it may have been a little longer. But anyways, so
for MMA Freak, I'm Edson Valenzuela.
And I'm Matthew Salzer.
Find me on Twitter at Edson_V.
At Matthew Salzer. Also, thanks to a bunch of people at Bloodpact 725 is my brother John.
At Heffy Jr. is Tom Heffernan.
Tom Heffernan. I don't remember what Ted's thing is, but you can find him
at Check. I think at Ted Check. I think it's just TDCZECH.
Something like that. But you can. He does like almost a daily
busy Ted
MMA update. Then also at Gabriel Keith, I think is Gabe's, and at Fanboy Nation for Fanboy Nation. Shout out to Robert Samo. Okay.
And also at MMA Freak Out for the MMA Freak Twitter.
Yep. Thank you. We'll probably be back next Thursday.
Okay.
So
have a good one.
Thank you very much and have a good day.